In the vast expanse of the Galactic Academy, where the most elite beings from across 17 star systems come to prove their worth, there exists a simple truth that every species has learned to accept. Humans are weak. They have no natural armor like the Corvani, no telepathic abilities like the Zephyrians, no enhanced reflexes like the Beltar. They are soft, fragile creatures who somehow convince the Galactic Council they deserve a place among the stars. But in the back row of Combat Theory 501 sits a human girl who never speaks, never raises her hand, never draws attention to herself. Professor Vexon barely remembers her name appears on his roster. Her classmates assume she's just another charity case, one of those humans who got in through some diversity program. They have no idea that this quiet, unremarkable student has spent the last 3 years systematically analyzing every combat technique, every weakness, every tactical blind spot of every species in the Academy. They don't know that behind her downcast eyes burns the focused intensity of a predator studying its prey. They're about to find out why humans earn the right to chase predators across light years of empty space. They're about to discover what happens when you underestimate the apex hunter from a world where everything wants to kill you. The hunt is about to begin. The morning sun of Kepler, Part 42b, cast long shadows across the crystalline spires of the Galactic Academy, its light refracting through the bioengineered atmosphere in shades of amber and gold. Maya Chen sat in her usual spot, last row, corner seat where the artificial gravity generators hummed just loud enough to mask the sound of her stylus scratching across her datapad. 3 years at the Academy, and she had perfected the art of being invisible. Professor Vexon's forearms gestured dramatically as he explained the finer points of Corvani battle tactics to the mixed-species classroom. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the overhead lights, each movement producing tiny clicks that Maya had long ago cataloged as indicators of his emotional state. Confident clicks meant he was enjoying the lesson. Rapid clicks suggested irritation. Today's pattern indicated boredom. He was going through the motions. The Corvani phalanx formation, Vexon droned, relies on overlapping shell coverage and coordinated plasma bursts. Note how the warriors position their carapaces to... Maya's stylus continued its quiet work, but she wasn't taking notes on Corvani tactics. She had mastered those 18 months ago. Instead, she was updating her behavioral analysis files. Zekar, the Corvani student in the third row, unconsciously adjusted his secondary arms whenever Vexon mentioned shell positioning, a tell that indicated anxiety about his own defensive capabilities. Ela, the Zephyrian in the second row, had her tendrils slightly extended in the direction of Jope, the Veltar exchange student, suggesting romantic interest that Jope's enhanced pheromone detection hadn't yet picked up on. These observations went into her files alongside thousands of others. Combat preferences, emotional triggers, physical limitations, social hierarchies. Maya collected it all with the patience of a spider weaving her web. Miss Chen. Maya's hand stilled. Professor Vexon was looking directly at her, his compound eyes reflecting the classroom's light in fractal patterns. The room had gone silent. Since you seem so engrossed in your work, perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on Corvani defensive formations. 27 pairs of alien eyes turned toward her. Maya felt her heart rate increase, not from fear, but from the familiar rush of being noticed. She had spent 3 years cultivating her image as the quiet, unremarkable human who barely belonged here. Breaking character now would be premature. She stood slowly. Her datapad clutched against her chest and gave a small shake of her head. Then she sat back down, eyes fixed on her desk. A few students snickered. Ela's tendrils curled in what Maya recognized as secondhand embarrassment. Jope's nostrils flared, picking up the chemical signature of what he probably interpreted as fear pheromones, though Maya's biology teacher would have told him that human stress responses were more complex than simple fear. "I see," Vexon said, his voice carrying the particular brand of condescension reserved for species he considered inferior. "Perhaps next time you'll pay attention to the lesson instead of whatever doodles you're working on." More laughter. Maya nodded meekly and made a show of putting her stylus away. But her mind was racing. because Professor Vexan had just made his first tactical error. After class, Maya walked the corridors at her usual pace, not slow enough to draw attention as weak, not fast enough to suggest urgency. The Academy's halls were a marvel of engineering, with gravity plates that adjusted to each species' needs and atmospheric processors that maintained optimal breathing conditions for 17 different physiologies. Maya moved through it all like a ghost. Noting every detail, she paused at the central plaza where students from across the galaxy gathered between classes. This was where the real education happened, not in classrooms but in the casual interactions that revealed true personalities. Corzon, a Corvani from an influential military family, was holding court near the quantum fountain. His shell bore the scars of 3 ceremonial combats, each one a mark of honor in his culture. He was regaling a mixed group with stories of his victory over a Therakian raider. "The fool thought his exoskeleton could protect him," Corzan boasted, his secondary arms gesturing expansively. "But Corvani steel has been cutting through Therakian armor for 3 centuries. One precise strike to the neck joint and—" Maya memorized the description of the combat technique he demonstrated. Corzan always revealed too much when he was trying to impress females from other species. His weakness wasn't physical, it was psychological. He needed to be seen as superior, which made him predictable. Near the meditation pods, she spotted Seren, a Veltar who had been her lab partner in xenobiology. The Veltar were known for their enhanced reflexes and night vision, adaptations from their homeworld's eternal twilight. Seren was practicing combat forms with another Veltar student, their movements so fast they appeared as blurs to most species. But Maya's eyes had been trained since childhood to track fast-moving objects. Her father had been a tennis coach before the contact war changed everything. He had taught her that speed was just another variable in the equation, intimidating only if you couldn't predict where the movement would end. She watched Seren's routine and identified the pattern within 30 seconds. The Veltar relied on overwhelming speed to confuse opponents, but their attack sequences followed a mathematical progression based on optimal energy expenditure. Once you knew the formula, their impossible speed became merely fast. "Maya?" She turned to find Dr. Sarah Kim approaching. Dr. Kim was one of only 3 human faculty members at the Academy, and she had become something of an unofficial mentor to the human students. "How are you settling him this semester, Doctor?" Kim asked, her voice carrying the careful tone she used when she suspected a student was struggling. Maya gave her a small smile and a thumbs up. Dr. Kim's expression softened. "I know it's difficult being so far from Earth," the older woman continued, "and I know some of the other students can be challenging. But you belong here, Maya. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Maya nodded gratefully, maintaining her image as the shy student who needed encouragement. In reality, she had never felt more in control of her environment. Every day brought new data, new insights into the species she would one day need to understand completely. Dr. Kim patted her shoulder gently and moved on, probably to find other human students who actually needed her support. Maya returned to her observations. Near the combat simulators, she noticed Thex, a Zephyrian with diplomatic family connections. The Zephyrians were telepathic, but their abilities had limitations that most species didn't understand. They could read surface thoughts and emotions, but only from species with compatible neural structures. Human minds, with their chaotic pattern of electrical activity, gave them headaches if they tried to probe too deeply. Thex was demonstrating this limitation now, unconsciously rubbing his temples after attempting to read the emotional state of a human student from the engineering program. Maya filed this observation away with all the others. The Academy's evening cycle was beginning, marked by the gradual dimming of the artificial suns. Students began dispersing to their various activities, some to study groups, others to recreational facilities designed for their species' needs. Maya made her way to the human dormitory, a modest section of the Academy designed with Earth-standard gravity and atmosphere. The quarters were comfortable but unremarkable, which suited her perfectly. She had specifically requested the smallest available room, claiming financial constraints. In reality, she wanted a space where every sound, every movement could be controlled. Her room was spartanly furnished: a bed, a desk, a wall-mounted display screen, and a small storage unit. But hidden in the storage unit, behind layers of clothing and personal items, was her real work. She activated her personal computer with a biometric scan and began uploading the day's observations. The system she had built was elegant in its simplicity: a behavioral analysis network that tracked patterns, predicted responses, and identified weaknesses across 17 different species. She pulled up Corzan's file first. The Corvani's psychological profile was nearly complete. His need for social dominance made him vulnerable to isolation tactics. His combat style favored direct confrontation, which could be turned against him with proper misdirection. His family connections made him overconfident, but also meant he had never faced a truly desperate opponent. Next, she reviewed her notes on Professor Vexan. His condescension toward humans was consistent with Corvani cultural attitudes, but his specific behavioral patterns suggested deeper issues. He had been passed over for tenure at more prestigious institutions. Maya had verified this through careful research of academic publications. His assignment to the academy was a professional disappointment that he took out on students he perceived as weak, all useful information. All pieces of the larger puzzle she had been assembling for 3 years. Maya opened a new file and began typing her daily report. These reports weren't for any official purpose. They were for her own understanding, a way of processing the countless details she collected each day. Day 847 at the Academy. Subjects continue to display predictable behavioral patterns. Professor Vexan's attempt to embarrass me in class provided excellent data on his psychological approach to perceived inferiors. Corzan revealed additional combat techniques during social posturing. Veltar combat forms show consistent mathematical progressions as hypothesized. She paused in her typing, remembering Dr. Kim's concerned expression. Human faculty member Dr. Kim continues to interpret my behavior as shyness rather than strategic choice. This misunderstanding remains useful for maintaining low profile. Maya saved the file and closed the computer. Tomorrow would bring new observations, new data points in the vast map she was creating. Every species at the academy was teaching her their secrets without realizing it. Every student, every professor, every administrator was unwittingly contributing to her education. She had come to the academy with a specific goal in mind, though she had never shared it with anyone. While her classmates saw their education as preparation for careers in diplomacy, science, or trade, Maya saw it as something else entirely. She was learning to hunt, not the primitive hunting of her ancestors with spears and arrows against beasts of fur and fang. This was hunting refined to its ultimate form. The careful study of prey, the patient cataloging of weaknesses, the methodical preparation for a confrontation that might come years in the future, because Maya had read the classified reports that most humans never saw. She knew about the tensions building between the human colonies and several alien governments. She knew about the trade disputes that could escalate into something much worse. She knew that humanity's position in the galaxy was far more precarious than most people realized. When that confrontation came, and it would come, humanity would need individuals who understood their potential enemies better than those enemies understood themselves. They would need hunters who could track their prey across light years of space and still predict every move. Maya had been preparing for that role since she was 15 years old. She changed into her night clothes and prepared for bed, but her mind continued working. Tomorrow would bring advanced xenobiology with Dr. Kim, where she would learn more about the physiological limitations of non-human species. There would be combat theory with Professor Vexan, where she could observe more examples of alien tactical thinking. And there would be recreation period, where students dropped their formal masks and revealed their true personalities. More data, more insights, more pieces of the puzzle that would one day make her the most effective hunter humanity had ever produced. As she lay in the darkness, Maya smiled to herself. Her classmates thought they were the predators in this ecosystem. The Corvani with their natural armor, the Veltar with their enhanced reflexes, the Zephyrians with their mental abilities. They all saw humans as soft, weak prey animals who had somehow stumbled into galactic civilization. They had no idea they were sharing their campus with a persistent predator whose ancestors had chased mammoths across continents and tracked wounded buffalo for days without rest. They didn't understand that every slight, every condescending comment, every dismissive gesture was being cataloged by a mind trained to wait, watch, and strike at the perfect moment. The hunt had already begun. They just didn't know it yet. The Academy's training complex sprawled across 12 levels beneath the main campus, each one designed to accommodate the diverse combat styles and physical requirements of the galaxy's most prominent species. Maya descended through the levels with her usual careful pace, noting the distribution of students and the subtle territorial boundaries that had formed over the years. Level 3 housed the Corvani training chambers, where heavily armored students practiced formation fighting in rooms built to withstand plasma weapon discharge. Level 5 belonged to the Veltar, with specialized equipment for their speed-based combat techniques. The Zephyrians preferred Level 7, where psionic dampeners allowed them to practice mental combat without interference. Maya's destination was Level 9, the human training area. It was notably smaller than the others, reflecting humanity's minority status at the Academy, and equipped with what most species considered primitive equipment. Free weights, obstacle courses, endurance training apparatus, tools designed for a species that had to rely on persistence and adaptability rather than natural advantages. She had spent countless hours in these chambers, not building muscle mass like her human classmates, but studying movement patterns and physiological responses under stress. Today, however, she had a different purpose. The sparring arena was empty except for one figure moving through forms near the far wall. Cadet Jackson, a third-year human student who had somehow convinced himself that raw strength could overcome alien advantages. His technique was sloppy, his breathing inefficient, but his dedication was admirable. Maya had been watching him for months, noting his patterns, his improvements, his limitations. "Mind if I join you?" she asked quietly. Jackson spun around, surprised. Maya rarely spoke to anyone and never initiated contact. His expression shifted through confusion to cautious welcome. Sure, Maya, right? From Dr. Kim's xenobiology class?" She nodded and moved to the equipment wall, selecting a training sword with the same careful consideration she applied to everything else. The weapon was balanced for human physiology, designed to simulate the combat implements humans might face in real-world conflicts. "I've been working on some forms," she said, her voice still soft but carrying more confidence than Jackson had ever heard from her. "Would you mind sparring? Nothing serious, just practice." Jackson's surprise deepened, but he nodded enthusiastically. Maya had never shown any interest in combat training. Most students assumed she was here for the academic opportunities rather than the warrior training that formed the Academy's core curriculum. They moved to the center of the arena, weapons held in ready positions. Maya settled into a stance that looked deceptively casual, weight balanced, muscles relaxed, but positioned for instant movement in any direction. "Standard Academy rules?" Jackson asked. "First contact wins?" Maya nodded, but her mind was already working through the engagement. Jackson favored overhead strikes. She had observed him practicing the movement dozens of times. His left shoulder tightened before each attack, a tell so obvious she wondered how his instructors had missed it. His footwork followed human boxing patterns, optimized for power rather than mobility. The match began with Jackson's predictable overhead strike. Maya sidestepped with minimal movement, her blade sliding along his in a deflection that sent him stumbling forward. Before he could recover, her practice sword touched his ribs with the lightest possible contact. "Point," she said quietly. Jackson stared at her, confusion replacing confidence. Lucky shot? They reset. This time Jackson approached more cautiously, trying to use his reach advantage. Maya watched his feet, his breathing, the micro-expressions that telegraphed his intentions. When he committed to a thrust, she wasn't where his blade expected her to be. Her counterattack was so fast that Jackson didn't realize he had been touched until Maya stepped back. 2 points. By the 5th consecutive defeat, Jackson's confusion had transformed into something approaching awe. Maya had moved through his attacks like water flowing around stones, each response perfectly calibrated to neutralize his advantages while exploiting weaknesses he hadn't known he possessed. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" he asked, breathing hard despite Maya's apparent lack of effort. "I watch," she said simply. "I learn." But her answer didn't capture the full truth. Maya had been training herself since childhood, not in conventional martial arts but in something far more sophisticated. Her parents had been military intelligence analysts before the Contact War, specialists in predicting enemy behavior through pattern recognition. They had taught her to see fighting not as a physical contest but as an information problem. Every species had optimal attack patterns based on their physiology. Every individual had personal habits that could be exploited. Combat was just applied psychology with kinetic elements. Could you teach me that?" Jackson asked. "I mean, if you're willing. I've been training for 3 years and I've never seen anything like what you just did." Maya considered the request. Jackson was earnest but not particularly intelligent. His improvement would be limited, but he could serve as a useful practice partner for refining her techniques against human opponents. "Meet me here tomorrow evening," she said. "Bring the others if they're interested." Word of Maya's sparring session spread through the human dormitory with the speed of truly surprising news. By the next evening, 8 students had gathered in the training arena, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Among them was Elena Rodriguez, a diplomatic track student whose family held positions in the colonial administration. She had always been cordial to Maya but distant, focusing her attention on students who seemed more likely to advance her career prospects. "So what exactly are we doing here?" Elena asked, her tone suggesting she had better ways to spend her time. Maya moved to the center of the arena without responding verbally. Instead, she gestured for volunteers to face her in sparring matches. What followed was a systematic demonstration of superiority that left the assembled humans questioning everything they thought they knew about combat. Maya moved through opponents with methodical precision, each match revealing different aspects of her abilities. Against Marcus, a heavy-set engineering student who relied on strength, she demonstrated how leverage and timing could defeat raw power. Against Sophie, a quick fencer who had trained since childhood, she showed how pattern recognition could neutralize superior technique. Against Elena herself, she revealed how psychological pressure could break concentration before physical contact even began. "This isn't possible," Elena breathed after her own defeat. "You're human." "We don't move like that." "Humans move exactly like that," Maya replied, finally allowing some of her real intelligence to show in her voice. "We just forgot how." She gestured for them to gather around her in the center of the arena. For the first time in 3 years, Maya had their complete attention. "What do you know about human hunting behavior?" she asked. The question caught them off guard. Marcus mumbled something about persistence hunting, drawing on half-remembered anthropology lessons. "Persistence hunting was just the beginning," Maya continued. "Humans are the only species on Earth that hunts by understanding their prey better than the prey understands itself. We don't have claws, so we learn to predict where our target would run. We don't have natural armor, so we learn to strike where it would hurt most. We don't have enhanced senses, so we learned to read behavior patterns that revealed more than any superpower could." She moved to the equipment wall and selected different training weapons: blade, staff, projectile simulator. "Every species at this academy has physical advantages over humans, but every one of them fights the same way they've fought for thousands of years. They rely on their natural gifts and never learn to adapt." Maya demonstrated with quick, precise movements, showing how different weapon styles could counter different alien physiologies. Corvani shells have articulated joints that can be targeted. Veltar's speed is impressive, but their attack patterns follow mathematical sequences that can be predicted. Zephyrian telepathy can be overwhelmed by chaotic thought patterns that humans naturally generate. The students watched in fascination as Maya broke down the combat weaknesses of species they had been taught to fear and respect. The Academy teaches alien combat styles because they want us to understand our potential allies and enemies, but they don't teach the most important lesson. Humans win by not fighting like humans are expected to fight. Elena stepped forward, her diplomatic instincts recognizing the implications of Maya's words. "You're talking about warfare," she said. "Real warfare, not Academy exercises." Maya met her gaze steadily. "I'm talking about survival. The galaxy isn't as peaceful as the Academy pretends. There are tensions building that most students never hear about. Trade disputes, territorial conflicts, species rights debates that could turn violent." She gestured around the training chamber. "While we're studying to become diplomats and traders, other species are training warriors who see humans as weak links in the galactic chain. When that attitude leads to action, we need to be ready." Jackson raised his hand tentatively. "But the Treaty of Kepler specifically prohibits species-based military action. The Galactic Council would—" "The Galactic Council is a political body," Maya interrupted. "Politics change. Treaties can be reinterpreted or abandoned entirely. When that happens, humans will be alone with whatever skills we've managed to develop." She moved back to the center of the arena, her posture shifting into something more formal, not aggressive, but unmistakably dangerous. "I've been studying every species at this academy for 3 years. Not their culture, not their history, but their weaknesses. How they fight, how they think, how they can be defeated if necessary." The silence in the chamber was complete. Maya had revealed more of herself in 10 minutes than she had in 3 years of academy life. "What are you suggesting?" Elena asked carefully. "I'm suggesting that humans need to remember what made us the apex predator on our own world. Not strength or speed or natural weapons, but intelligence applied to hunting. The ability to study, track, and defeat anything that threatens us." Maya picked up a training staff and moved through a complex routine, her movements flowing from human martial arts into techniques she had adapted specifically for fighting non-human opponents. "I can teach you to fight like humans should fight, not like weakened versions of alien warriors, but like the persistence predators we've always been. Patient, analytical, unstoppable once we commit to the hunt." Marcus stepped forward, his expression serious. "You really think it could come to that? Open conflict?" Maya paused in her routine, considering how much to reveal. These students weren't cleared for the classified intelligence reports she had accessed through her parents' old contacts. They didn't know about the hegemony movements growing in several star systems, or the economic pressures that were making human colonies increasingly valuable targets. "I think it's better to be prepared for something that never happens than to be unprepared for something that does," she said finally. Ayla nodded slowly. As someone from a political family, she understood the logic of worst-case planning. "What would this training involve?" she asked. Maya smiled, and for the first time her expression carried a hint of the predator that had been hidden beneath 3 years of careful camouflage. "First, you learn to see. Really see. Every species has tells, habits, weaknesses they don't even know they possess. I'll teach you to read them the way our ancestors read animal tracks." She moved to a wall display and activated a holographic projector, bringing up images of various alien species in combat poses. "Second, you learn to think like hunters rather than fighters. Fighters meet force with force. Hunters find the one weak point that brings down prey 10 times their size." The holograms shifted, showing human figures demonstrating techniques Maya had developed for each species. "Third, you learn patience. Humans are endurance predators. We don't need to win quickly. We need to win eventually. Every other species at this academy has been taught to seek fast victories. That's their weakness." Jackson raised his hand again. "This isn't going to be like normal academy training, is it?" Maya's smile widened. "Nothing about this will be normal. You'll train harder than you ever have before. You'll learn things the academy doesn't teach and develop skills they don't test for. And when you're finished, you'll be more dangerous than any alien student on this campus." She looked around the group, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. But you'll also be human in the truest sense, not the domesticated version that the galaxy finds acceptable, but the apex predator that conquered an entire planet through intelligence and determination. Elena spoke for the group. When do we start? Now Maya replied. Tonight you learn to see. Tomorrow we begin hunting. 6 weeks into Maya's unconventional training program, the human students at the academy had begun to change in ways that their alien classmates couldn't quite define. It wasn't anything obvious, no dramatic improvements in physical strength or speed, no new technologies or techniques that showed up in formal assessments, but there was something different in the way they moved through the corridors, a new quality of attention that made other species unconsciously step aside. Maya watched these changes with satisfaction as she made her way to Professor Vexon's combat theory class. Her students were learning, adapting, becoming something closer to what humans were capable of being. But today would bring a more significant test. The Academy's semi-annual war games were beginning. These elaborate exercises pitted mixed-species teams against each other in complex scenarios designed to test not just combat skills but tactical thinking, resource management, and interspecies cooperation. Students were randomly assigned to teams, given minimal equipment, and dropped into vast simulation environments where they had to achieve objectives while competing against other teams. Maya had been waiting for this opportunity for 3 years. Today we announce team assignments for the war games, Professor Vexon declared as students filed into the classroom. His manner was even more pompous than usual, clearly relishing his role in what was considered the Academy's premier evaluation. Maya took her usual seat in the back row, but her attention was completely focused. She had analyzed the war game structure extensively, identifying patterns in team assignments and scenario designs that the Academy staff probably didn't realize existed. Team Alpha, Vexon began reading from his datapad. Corzan of the Corvani, Thex of the Zephyrians, Velnara of the Veltar, Grix of the Therakians, and... He paused, his compound eyes finding Maya in the back row. Maya Chen of the Humans. Maya kept her expression neutral, but internally she felt a surge of anticipation. This was perfect. Not only had she been assigned to a team with representatives of the major species she had been studying, but the selection seemed almost deliberately designed to test human capabilities against superior alien forces. Around the classroom, other team assignments were announced. She noted that Elena had been assigned to Team Beta with Jackson and several of her other training partners. Good. They would have opportunities to demonstrate their new capabilities without drawing undue attention to Maya's own plans. The scenario this semester involves a hostile takeover of a mining colony, Vexon continued. Teams will be assigned either attacking or defending roles, with victory conditions based on control of key strategic positions. The simulation will run for 72 standard hours with full combat authorization for training weapons. Maya filed away the details while studying her assigned teammates. Corzan she knew well from months of observation, proud, predictable, prone to dramatic gestures that telegraphed his intentions. Thex the Zephyrian would be more challenging, with his telepathic abilities providing tactical advantages. Velnara was an unknown quantity, a transfer student who had arrived recently. Grix represented perhaps the greatest threat, as Therakian psychology was notoriously difficult for other species to understand. But Maya had been preparing for exactly this type of challenge. Teams will have 24 hours to plan before deployment, Vexon announced. Use the time wisely. These exercises carry significant weight in your final evaluations. After class, Maya's teammates gathered in one of the Academy's tactical planning chambers. The room was equipped with holographic projectors, strategic databases, and communication systems designed to accommodate the needs of all major species. What followed was immediately instructive about group dynamics and individual personalities. Corzan naturally assumed command, his Corvani military background making leadership seem like a birthright. He activated the room's central projector and began outlining what he clearly considered an obvious strategy. The scenario specifies that we're defending the mining colony, he declared, his secondary arms gesturing at the holographic terrain map. Standard defensive doctrine calls for fortified positions at these choke points, overlapping fields of fire, and mobile reserves positioned here and here. Maya watched her teammates' reactions carefully. Thex's tendrils were extended in concentration, probably trying to read the emotional undertones of the group's responses. Velnara remained perfectly still, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to process information faster than the others could speak. Grix's expression was unreadable behind his protective face mask, but his breathing patterns suggested careful evaluation rather than automatic agreement. The attacking teams will expect conventional defensive strategies, Corzon continued. But Corvani formations have held against superior forces for centuries. We establish our primary defensive line here, secondary positions here, and... "What about the mining equipment?" Maya asked quietly. All eyes turned to her. It was the first time she had spoken since the team assignments were announced. "The scenario mentions active mining operations," she continued, her voice still soft but carrying new confidence. "That means heavy machinery, excavation tunnels, processing facilities. The tactical map only shows surface features." Corzan's expression suggested he hadn't considered this factor. "Mining equipment is civilian infrastructure, not relevant to military operations." Maya stood and moved to the holographic display, manipulating the controls with practiced ease. The surface map dissolved, replaced by a three-dimensional cross-section that revealed the underground complexity of a typical mining colony. Tunnel networks extending for kilometers underground. Processing centers that require specialized technical knowledge to operate. Heavy excavation machinery that could be adapted for defensive purposes. Maya traced the underground passages with a gesture. The attacking team won't expect to deal with three-dimensional defensive networks. Thex's tendrils curled in what Maya recognized as interest. "You're suggesting we use the mining infrastructure as part of our defensive strategy." "I'm suggesting we think like miners instead of soldiers," Maya replied. "This isn't a military base, it's an industrial facility that happens to need defending. Different environment, different opportunities." She manipulated the display again, highlighting specific areas of the underground network. Automated excavation systems that could be reprogrammed as mobile weapon platforms. Or processing facilities that could produce improvised defensive materials. Tunnel networks that allow for rapid repositioning without surface exposure. Velnara spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the precise diction of her species. "The simulation parameters include resource constraints. Heavy equipment requires specialized knowledge to operate effectively." Maya nodded. "That's where human adaptability becomes an advantage. We learn to operate unfamiliar systems faster than most species because we don't have specialized evolutionary traits to rely on." Grix made a sound that might have been approval, though Therakian vocalizations were difficult for other species to interpret. "You're proposing that we abandon conventional defensive doctrine in favor of improvised industrial warfare?" Corzan asked, his tone suggesting the concept was either brilliant or insane. "I'm proposing that we use the environment to our advantage, instead of trying to impose our preferred tactics on an unsuitable terrain," Maya replied. "The attacking teams will be expecting to fight against fortified positions using standard combined arms approaches. They won't be prepared for a defense that turns the entire colony infrastructure into a weapon." She gestured to the holographic display where mining tunnels stretched in all directions beneath the surface facilities. "Humans call it asymmetric warfare. When you can't match your enemy's strengths directly, you force them to fight in conditions where their advantages become liabilities." Thex's mental probing was stronger now, but Maya had spent months learning to generate the chaotic thought patterns that made human minds difficult for Zephyrians to read. To him, she would seem focused but unpredictable, committed but impossible to anticipate. This approach would require extensive coordination between team members, Velnara observed. "Our species have different capabilities and limitations." Maya smiled. "That's the second advantage. Most teams try to minimize species differences through standardized tactics. We could amplify our differences to create capabilities that no attacking team would expect." She moved around the holographic display indicating positions for each teammate. Corzon's natural armor makes him ideal for holding choke points where the enemy expects to break through. But instead of static defensive positions, he becomes a mobile obstacle that appears wherever the enemy thinks they've found a weakness. Corzon's posture straightened as he recognized the tactical elegance of the proposal. Thex's telepathic abilities could coordinate our movements without electronic communication that might be intercepted or jammed. But more importantly, he could project false emotional states to confuse enemy tactics. Thex's tendrils curled in what Maya had learned indicated pleased surprise. Velnara's enhanced reflexes make her perfect for rapid response scenarios, but in an industrial environment she could operate multiple systems simultaneously at speeds that would overwhelm opponents trying to counter our moves. Maya turned to Grix, acknowledging that she knew less about Thracian capabilities than the others. Grix's species psychology makes him difficult for enemies to predict or understand. In conventional warfare, that might be a minor advantage. In an environment where we're deliberately doing the unexpected, it becomes a force multiplier. The Thracian's breathing pattern shifted to what Maya hoped indicated approval. And humans? Corzon asked. What role does your species play in this unconventional strategy? Maya's smile widened, revealing the predator she had kept hidden for 3 years. Humans coordinate the hunt. We're the species that learned to track mammoth across continents, to pursue wounded prey for days without rest, to turn any environment into a trap for creatures larger and stronger than ourselves. She gestured to encompass the entire holographic colony. Every species has optimal tactics based on their evolved advantages, but humans learn to win by refusing to fight on our enemy's terms. We make the environment itself into our weapon. Maya manipulated the display one final time, showing how the various elements of her strategy could work together. The attacking teams will come expecting to overwhelm defensive positions through superior firepower or coordination. Instead, they'll find themselves fighting against the colony itself, dealing with hazards and obstacles that emerge from systems they didn't know could be weaponized. The room fell silent as her teammates absorbed the implications of what she was proposing. Maya had just outlined a defensive strategy unlike anything taught in academy courses. One that treated the war game less like a military exercise and more like an elaborate hunting expedition. This could work, Velnara said finally, but it would require us to trust human tactical instincts over our own species' proven methods. Not trust, Maya corrected, coordination. Every species contributes their natural advantages, but we apply them in ways that attacking teams won't anticipate because they've never seen these capabilities combined effectively. Corzon's compound eyes fixed on Maya with new interest. For the first time, he seemed to be seeing her as something other than the quiet human who sat in the back of classrooms. "You've been planning something like this for some time, haven't you?" he asked. Maya nodded. "I've been studying asymmetric conflict scenarios since I arrived at the academy. Most species approach warfare as an extension of their natural capabilities. Humans learn to approach it as a problem-solving exercise where the problem is how to defeat superior opposition." Thex's tendrils extended toward her, then quickly withdrew as her chaotic thought patterns triggered another telepathic headache. "Your mind is unusual for a human," he said carefully. "More focused than most of your species, but also more chaotic. Focused on chaos," Maya agreed. "It's a human specialty." Grix made another sound that might have been approval or warning. Maya was beginning to think that ambiguity was deliberate, a way of keeping potential enemies uncertain about Thracian intentions. "We have 18 hours remaining for planning," Corzon said, reasserting his leadership role but clearly accepting Maya's strategic framework. "If we're going to implement this unconventional approach, we'll need detailed preparation." Maya moved back to the holographic controls. "Then let's begin the hunt." The simulation environment materialized around Maya's team in the pre-dawn darkness of an artificial world, its landscape crafted from solid light and force fields to create a mining colony so realistic that the air carried the scent of metal dust and industrial chemicals. The Academy's simulation technology was advanced enough to fool all 5 senses, creating an environment where training weapons could inflict real pain and tactical mistakes could result in genuine consequences. Maya stood at the edge of the primary mining facility, her team scattered across the colony according to the plan they had developed during their 18 hours of preparation. In her earpiece, she could hear the steady breathing of her teammates as they settled into positions that would have seemed random to any observer who didn't understand the strategy they were implementing. "Team Alpha, you have defensive assignment for Sector 7, came the neutral voice of the Academy's simulation controller. "Attacking forces will begin their assault in 30 minutes. Victory conditions are control of the primary processing facility for a continuous period of 4 hours or complete neutralization of opposing forces." Maya smiled grimly as she checked her equipment one final time. The Academy had provided each team with standard-issue training weapons and basic supplies, but they had been encouraged to supplement these with anything they could improvise from the simulation environment. Most teams would interpret this as permission to build better fortifications or create additional weapons. Maya's team had taken a different approach entirely. "Corzan, status report," she said softly into her communicator. "Mobile platform operational," came the reply. What Corzan didn't say, but what Maya knew, was that he had spent the last 4 hours learning to operate a massive ore-hauling vehicle that could carry his armored form at high speed through the colony's road network. Instead of establishing a fixed defensive position, he had turned himself into a 2-ton surprise that could appear anywhere the enemy thought they had achieved breakthrough. "Thex, communication network ready? Telepathic links established with all team members except you," the Zephyrian replied. Maya's chaotic thought patterns made direct mental contact painful for him, but he could maintain contact with the others while relaying information to her through conventional means. More importantly, he had spent hours practicing the projection of false emotional signatures that would confuse enemy telepaths trying to read their tactical situation. "Velnara, system integration complete." The Veltar had used her enhanced reflexes to interface with dozens of industrial systems simultaneously, creating a network of mobile excavation equipment that could reshape the battlefield in real time. What had been clear terrain could become impassable obstacles within minutes, while apparent barriers could suddenly disappear to create unexpected avenues of attack. "Grix, stealth positions confirmed?" A sound that might have been affirmation came through the communicator. The Therakian had vanished into the colony's maintenance tunnels, carrying improvised explosives created from mining charges. His psychological profile made him nearly impossible for other species to predict or track, turning him into a ghost that could strike from directions that enemies wouldn't think to guard. Maya checked her own equipment, which appeared minimal compared to her teammates' elaborate preparations. She carried standard training weapons and a small collection of devices that looked like civilian electronics, but appearances were deceiving. Maya had turned herself into something far more dangerous than any weapon. She had become the Predator's brain. 20 minutes to contact," she announced. "Remember, we're not defending a mining colony. We're hunting a pack of prey animals that think they're predators." Through the pre-positioned surveillance devices she had placed throughout the colony, Maya watched as the attacking forces approached. Team Beta, she noted with satisfaction, included Elena and several of her other training partners. They would provide an excellent test of how her unconventional education was progressing. The attacking team moved in standard academy formation, Corvani heavy units in front, Veltar scouts on the flanks, Zephyrian coordinators in protected positions. Their approach was textbook perfect, which made it perfectly predictable. "Contact in the eastern sector," Maya whispered into her communicator. "4 attackers moving through the ore processing area. Velnara, give them something to think about." On her surveillance screen, Maya watched as a massive excavation claw suddenly emerged from what had appeared to be solid ground, forcing the attacking team to scatter. But this wasn't an attack, it was misdirection. While the enemy was focused on the obvious threat, Grix was moving into position behind them through tunnels that didn't appear on any tactical map the Academy had provided. "Corzan Eastern breakthrough attempt in 30 seconds, Maya announced. "Show them what mobile defense really means." The ore hauler emerged from behind a processing building at precisely the moment when the attacking team thought they had regrouped from Velnara's distraction. Corzan's armored form, protected by 2 tons of industrial machinery, scattered the attackers like leaves before a storm. But Maya wasn't trying to eliminate enemies, she was hurting them. "Thex, project confidence and aggression toward the central facility," she instructed. "Make them think we're massing for a counterattack." While the Zephyrian created false emotional signatures that would confuse enemy telepaths, Maya watched as the attacking team regrouped and moved toward what they believed was the main defensive position. They had no way of knowing that the central facility was exactly where Maya wanted them to go. 15 minutes to Phase 2, Maya announced. "Everyone remember, we're not trying to win quickly, we're trying to win completely." The attacking team approached the central processing facility with appropriate caution, clearly expecting heavy resistance. What they found instead was an apparently lightly defended position that seemed to offer an easy victory. Maya smiled as she watched them commit their forces to the assault. They had just walked into the most sophisticated trap ever deployed in an Academy wargame. "Velnara, initiate underground reconfiguration," Maya commanded. Beneath the attackers' feet, the colony's tunnel network began to change. Passages sealed themselves while new ones opened, creating a maze that trapped the attacking force in an area where their superior numbers became a liability rather than an advantage. "Grix, begin harassment protocols." Explosions bloomed throughout the trapped area, not designed to cause serious damage but to create chaos and confusion. The attacking team found themselves dealing with obstacles that appeared and disappeared, passages that led nowhere, and threats that struck from impossible directions. "Corzan, begin pursuit pattern Alpha." The mobile defense unit began a systematic sweep of the confused attackers, using the colony's road network to appear simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Each time the enemy thought they had identified his position, Corzan would disappear through an industrial passage that hadn't been there moments before. Thex, project, fear, and uncertainty make them doubt their own tactical assessment. The Zephyrians' false emotional broadcasts added a layer of psychological warfare that the attacking team had no defense against. Their telepaths began reporting contradictory information about enemy positions and intentions, creating confusion that spread through their entire force. Maya watched her trap close with the satisfaction of a predator whose prey had finally stopped running. But the real test was still to come. "Elena's team is adapting faster than the others," she observed through her surveillance network. Elena had been one of her most dedicated students during their training sessions, and it showed in how quickly she recognized the unconventional nature of the defense they were facing. "Maya, this isn't standard defensive doctrine." Elena's voice came through the emergency communication frequency that Academy rules required remain open. "What are you doing?" "I'm hunting," Maya replied simply. "The question is whether you remember what I taught you about being prey." She watched as Elena began issuing rapid orders to her portion of the attacking team. Instead of continuing the assault on the central facility, Elena was pulling her people back and trying to establish a defensive perimeter. She had recognized that the tactical situation wasn't what it appeared to be. "Interesting," Maya murmured. "Velnara, Elena's group is withdrawing to the eastern ridge. Prepare to give them some real problems to solve." But Elena's tactical adaptation sparked a more aggressive response from the other attacking elements. Led by a Corvani cadet named Vexar, they began a direct assault on the central facility, apparently believing they could overwhelm Maya's team through sheer force. "Phase 3 initiation," Maya announced. "Time to show them what humans really hunt like." What followed was unlike any Academy wargame in the institution's history. Maya's team moved through the industrial landscape like a coordinated pack of predators, each individual playing a specific role in a hunting pattern that had been refined by millions of years of evolutionary pressure. Corzan became the driver, using his mobile platform to force the attacking team into predetermined movement patterns. Velnara served as the landscape itself, reshaping the environment to channel enemy forces into kill zones. Grix functioned as the ghost in the system, striking from unexpected directions to maintain pressure and confusion. Thex wove false information through the enemy's communication network, making their own coordination efforts work against them. And Maya served as the predator's brain, coordinating every movement with the patience of a species that had learned to track wounded mammoths for weeks across hostile terrain. "Contact with Elena's defensive position," Maya announced as her surveillance network detected the renewed engagement. Elena had established a competent perimeter, but she was thinking like a human trained in alien tactics rather than like a human who remembered her own species' capabilities. "Corzin, demonstrate proper human hunting technique," Maya instructed. What followed was a masterpiece of persistence predation adapted to futuristic warfare. Instead of attacking Elena's position directly, Corzin began a systematic harassment campaign, appearing at the edge of their perimeter just long enough to draw return fire before disappearing into the industrial maze. Each appearance came from a different direction, at irregular intervals, creating psychological pressure that accumulated over time. Velnara begin environmental pressure protocol. The landscape around Elena's position began to change subtly, not enough to trigger immediate response, but enough to create a constant sense of uncertainty. Passages that had been clear began to narrow. Defensive positions that had seemed solid developed structural instabilities. The environment itself became an enemy. Thex, project persistence and inevitability. Make them understand they're not fighting a battle, they're being hunted. Maya watched through her surveillance network as the psychological pressure began to tell on Elena's team. They had been trained to deal with direct assault, clever tactics, even superior firepower, but they had no experience with being the focus of a coordinated hunting effort designed to wear them down over time. Grix begin the final phase. The Therakian's response was typically wordless, but Maya's monitors showed him moving into position for what would be the culmination of their hunting strategy. Not a sudden assault designed to overwhelm the enemy, but the final move in a pattern that had been building for hours. "Elena," Maya called through the open communication channel. "Last chance to remember what I taught you about how humans really fight." There was silence for a moment before Elena's reply came through, tinged with what might have been respect or fear. "You're not fighting like humans are supposed to fight." Maya smiled as she prepared to spring the final trap. "I'm fighting like humans did before we forgot what we really are." The Academy's main auditorium had never hosted a debriefing quite like this one. Representatives from 17 different species filled the tiered seating, their attention focused on the central holographic display where the final moments of the war game played out in slow motion. What they were watching challenged fundamental assumptions about combat, tactics, and the role of humans in galactic military doctrine. Maya sat in the front row with her teammates, maintaining the same quiet demeanor she had cultivated for 3 years. But everything had changed. The faculty members studying the tactical recordings weren't looking at a shy human student anymore. They were analyzing the work of someone who had just revolutionized their understanding of asymmetric warfare. Admiral Korthak of the Corvani High Command leaned forward in his seat, his 4 eyes tracking the movement of forces across the holographic battlefield. As one of the Academy's most distinguished visiting lecturers, his presence at a student exercise debriefing was unprecedented. But then, nothing about Maya's performance had fallen within normal parameters. "Replay the final sequence," Admiral Korthak commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. The holographic display shifted, showing the last hour of the 72-hour exercise. Maya watched herself coordinate her team's final hunting pattern, each movement flowing into the next with the inexorable precision of a natural force. Elena's defending team had established what should have been an impregnable position on the eastern ridge, using terrain advantages and overlapping fields of fire to create a defensive network that could have held against any conventional assault. For 6 hours they had successfully repelled every attack that the other elements of the war game could mount against them. But Maya hadn't been conducting conventional assaults. "Note the temporal pattern," Dr. Sarah Kim observed from the faculty section. Maya's former mentor was studying the recordings with evident fascination and perhaps a touch of concern. Team Alpha maintains contact pressure for extended periods without seeking immediate tactical resolution. On the display, Corzan's mobile platform appeared at the edge of Elena's perimeter, drew defensive fire, then disappeared before a counterattack could be organized. 20 minutes later, he repeated the pattern from a different direction. Then, again, and again. Persistence predation, Admiral Korthak murmured, his voice carrying recognition that sent ripples through the assembled faculty. But applied to military tactics? Professor Vexan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His earlier condescension toward Maya seemed absurd now, but the implications of what she had accomplished were deeply troubling to someone trained in conventional military doctrine. The human team maintained tactical pressure for 18 continuous hours without achieving any decisive battlefield victories, he said, clearly struggling to understand how such an approach could be effective. By all standard measures, this should have resulted in defeat through resource exhaustion. Maya finally spoke, her voice carrying across the auditorium with quiet confidence. Standard measures assume that both sides are fighting the same war. We weren't. The holographic display shifted to show the psychological monitoring data that the Academy collected during all training exercises. The readouts from Elena's team showed a gradual but inexorable increase in stress indicators, fatigue markers, and decision-making degradation. Elena's team was fighting a defensive battle against superior numbers, Maya continued. They had limited ammunition, fixed positions, and decreasing options for tactical flexibility. They were trying to win by not losing. She gestured toward the display, where the final moments of the engagement were beginning to unfold. My team was conducting a hunt. We had no time constraints, no resource limitations that mattered, and we could afford to take as long as necessary to achieve our objective. We were trying to win by making our prey exhaust themselves. Admiral Korthak's compound eyes fixed on Maya with the intensity of a predator recognizing another predator. Explain the final sequence. Maya stood, moving to the holographic controls with the same careful precision she had demonstrated throughout her academy career. But now that precision was revealed as the focused attention of a hunter rather than the nervous caution of prey. After 18 hours of harassment, Elena's team was operating at 60% of baseline efficiency, she said, manipulating the display to highlight the relevant data. Their ammunition reserves were at 30%. Most critically, their decision-making response time had increased by 40%. The holographic battlefield shifted, showing Grix's position in the tunnel network beneath Elena's defensive position. At this point, a conventional assault would still have failed. Elena's team retained enough firepower to repel any direct attack, but they were no longer capable of responding effectively to multiple simultaneous threats. Maya activated the final sequence. Grix's explosives detonated beneath Elena's eastern flank, not enough to cause serious damage, but sufficient to create confusion and force rapid redeployment. Simultaneously, Corzan's mobile platform appeared on the western approach, demanding immediate defensive response. Velnara's mining equipment began reshaping the terrain to the north, creating the appearance of a major assault preparation. 3 threats, 3 directions, each one requiring immediate tactical response from a team whose reaction time had been degraded by 18 hours of persistent pressure, Maya explained. Elena's team responded to each threat individually, which broke their defensive coordination. The holographic display showed Elena's forces splitting to address the multiple challenges, leaving gaps in their perimeter that Maya's team exploited with surgical precision. But the most important element was psychological, Maya continued. After 18 hours of being hunted, Elena's team was no longer thinking like defenders. They were thinking like prey animals trying to escape from predators. She paused the display at the moment when Elena's defensive line finally collapsed. And prey animals make predictable mistakes when they panic. The auditorium was silent except for the soft sounds of various species breathing in their own atmospheric requirements. Maya had just demonstrated that humans could defeat supposedly superior opponents not through technological advancement or superior numbers, but through the application of hunting instincts refined over millions of years of evolution. Admiral Korthak was the first to break the silence. This tactical approach, he said slowly, it could be scaled beyond training exercises. The implications of his statement rippled through the faculty like a shockwave. Maya had not merely won an Academy war game, she had proven that human military doctrine could be fundamentally different from anything the galaxy had encountered before. Dr. Kim leaned forward in her seat. Maya, where did you learn to think about warfare in these terms? Maya turned to face her former mentor, and for the first time in 3 years, she allowed her real intelligence to show completely. I learned by studying every species at this academy for 3 years, she said. Not their culture or their technology, but their fundamental approach to conflict resolution. Every species fights the way their evolution taught them to fight. Corvani use their natural armor to create formation tactics. Veltar rely on speed for overwhelming assault. Zephyrians coordinate through mental communication. She gestured toward the assembled faculty, representing the military traditions of 17 different worlds. But humans learned to fight by studying our prey until we understood them better than they understood themselves. We learned patience, persistence, and the ability to turn any environment into a hunting ground. Maya moved back to the holographic controls, bringing up new displays that showed comparative analysis data she had been collecting throughout her academy career. I've spent 3 years cataloging the tactical preferences, psychological patterns, and combat limitations, not because I plan to fight them, but because understanding potential adversaries is what humans do. Admiral Korthak's posture shifted in what Maya recognized as increased attention and possibly alarm. You've been conducting intelligence analysis on Academy students and faculty?
I've been learning, Maya replied simply. Every species here has been teaching me their secrets without realizing it.
Combat instructors demonstrating optimal tactical approaches, students revealing their thought processes under stress, faculty members explaining the strategic doctrine of their homeworlds. She activated a final display that showed the scope of her analysis, behavioral profiles, tactical assessments, and vulnerability studies covering every major species represented at the Academy. Humans are persistence predators, Admiral. When we decide to hunt something, we study it until it has no secrets left. Then we chase it until it can't run anymore. The silence that followed was heavy with implications that extended far beyond Academy training exercises. Maya had just revealed that humanity possessed intelligence capabilities that other species hadn't suspected, applied with a methodical thoroughness that suggested preparation for conflicts that might never come, or might be inevitable. Professor Vexon found his voice first, though it carried none of his usual condescension. Miss Chen, what you're describing sounds less like educational activity and more like preparation for warfare. Maya met his gaze steadily. I prefer to think of it as being ready for whatever the galaxy might require of humanity. Admiral Korthak stood slowly, his armored form imposing, even by Corvani standards. Young human, your tactical demonstration has been illuminating, but it raises questions that extend beyond Academy curricula. Maya nodded. I'm sure it does, Admiral, but those are questions that galactic leadership will have to answer. I'm just a student who learned to see clearly. Dr. Kim was studying Maya with an expression that mixed pride with concern. What do you plan to do with these capabilities after graduation? For the first time since the debriefing began, Maya smiled with genuine warmth. Kim, if we're fortunate, these skills will never be required for anything more serious than training exercises and academic analysis. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. But if the galaxy proves less peaceful than we hope, humanity will have individuals who understand our potential adversaries better than they understand themselves. We'll have hunters ready to protect human interests with whatever methods prove necessary. Admiral Korthak made a sound that might have been respect or wariness. And if those methods include the tactical approach you demonstrated today? Maya's smile widened, revealing the predator that had been hidden beneath 3 years of careful camouflage. Then our adversaries will learn what it means to be hunted by a species that conquered an entire planet through patience, intelligence, and the absolute refusal to give up once we've marked our prey. She gestured toward the holographic display, where the final moments of the war game showed Elena's team surrendering to forces they had never fully understood. The galaxy taught us that humans are weak, but weakness and strength are relative concepts. We may not be the fastest, strongest, or most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. Maya moved back to her seat, her posture relaxed, but her eyes carrying the focused intensity that had characterized her performance throughout the exercise. But we are the species that learn to hunt everything else. And once we decide to pursue something, we never, ever give up. The debriefing ended shortly afterward, but Maya knew that the real consequences were just beginning. Word of her tactical demonstration would spread throughout the academy, then beyond to the military establishments of every major species. Some would dismiss it as an academic curiosity. Others would recognize it as a fundamental shift in the balance of galactic power. Maya gathered her materials and prepared to leave the auditorium, already planning her next steps. She had revealed herself at last, but only partially. There was still more to learn, more to understand about the species she might one day need to hunt in earnest. But for now, it was enough that the galaxy knew what humanity was capable of when they stopped pretending to be anything other than the apex predators they had always been. The quiet student in the rear of the classroom was gone forever. In her place stood something far more dangerous. A human who had learned to hunt among the stars and who was ready to teach others of her species to do the same. The hunt was no longer coming. The hunt had begun.